Hey everyone, welcome to the Industry Show. I'm your host, Nitin Bajaj, and joining me today is Sai Kopparapu. Sai, welcome on the show.
Thank you, Nitin. Thank you for hosting me.
Hey, my pleasure. Let's start with who is Sai?
Who is Sai? Great first question. Sai is, I would like to call myself an entrepreneur for past 12 years now. And I'm from Bangalore, India, where I launched a nonprofit. And that's the first entry to being a social entrepreneur.
Hmm.
And currently I'm working at, I launched a for-profit company, which is called as Winpra. And in both of them, both my nonprofit, which was called Wise, and currently Winpra, the uniqueness about is how do we build organizations, whether it's nonprofit or profit, that creates value for the community, that creates an impact, whether it's social or economic development. So I like building companies or organizations, thinking what kind of value do we create and going backward and creating a product that serves that value or that end user or the customer. So that's the side that is Sai, who is basically creating products that meets the end goals.
Love that. We will talk about Winpra in more detail, but tell us a little bit about Wise. Why did you start it? What is it? And what's the kind of impact you'd hope to achieve through it?
When I was in grade 9, we had so many science experiments or assignments that were given to us. And so after we do those hands-on experiments and we submit it to the teachers or the professors there, and once it's done, we dispose those experiments. But how could we reuse those experiments? My friends and I, three of us, we came together, took those experiments and started teaching in underprivileged schools, the schools which did not have access to teachers or proper education. And so imagine we as students becoming teachers, taking those experiments and going to schools and teaching them. So it started like a 3-member student club that grew into a nonprofit, and which led, we had we grew to close to 100 plus volunteers serving 20,000 plus students across 3 Indian states. And we were supported by multinational corporations under their corporate social responsibility. And then we collaborated with Engineers Without Borders, Germany, and installing solar power plants in the underprivileged schools that did not have electricity at all. So that was my first exposure to infrastructure, solar power plants, and again, both of them tied to creating an impact.
Yep, that's amazing. And you were barely a teenager. So that's really amazing that you thought about this and you were able to grow it to that scale, bring on enterprise partners, international partners. Most amazing thing about that is being able to help those 30,000 children. Huge.
Exactly. And the best part is one of the schools that we were working in, they were 285 Sri Lankan refugees. And this was, I was in grade 10, and it's called Indragan International Academy, the former Prime Minister of India. She set up that school to accommodate all the Sri Lankan refugees during the war. And when we first went and showed them those experiments and explaining them what's the concept of force, the pressure, the area using these different scientific experiments, they thought it was like a magic show. And all the students were so curious in asking, how is that experiment working, right? Without any knowledge. And then when they were so curious and they posed those questions to us, and when we answered to them, and when we gave the solutions on how things work, that's when we realized that's the best form of access to education. It's not access to education just does not mean giving them the books or teachers or anything, but how do you make them learn? That's the impact we look to create through the nonprofit.
Yep. And the biggest joy is watching them, those light bulbs go off. Right?
That's the part.
That's the
Yep.
most fascinating part of it. Now, tell us about how that passion, that interest, that learning that came from being a social entrepreneur, how did that translate into Winpra? And give us a sense for what Winpra is doing, what stage and phase of the journey you are in, and what is the vision behind it?
Winpra, I don't know if people agree to this. I personally see Winpra and Wise to be very, very similar companies. Wise, where we build like science experiments, and in Winpra, we are creating large scale simulations. Again, experiments for real estate developers to identify what kind of assets should they build on a given parcel of land. Which is the next market should they go and launch a new hotel project based on the local market demand there. So we are providing the large real estate developers and asset managers with AI-driven tools where they can run hundreds of simulations or thousands of simulations to find a land opportunity and build assets that meet the local market demand. And probably there's a location out there that is amazing for a hotel, or there is a location there where hospital is very much needed because there's no hospital for 30 or 40 miles from that in that area, right? Or maybe a medical office. So those are the kind of tools we give developers to understand markets, the assets that's needed in those markets, and what's the size and type of assets. So end to end land identification to asset management is what we run through the platform. So that's basically Winpra.
That's amazing. So if I were to peel that layer and go down one more, you're essentially joining multiple data sets, running analytics, and then allowing these real estate developers to bring in maybe some more of their proprietary data so they can get really specific opportunities that come back at them.
Perfect. Hearing you say this, I think I did a good job pitching to you now. So yeah, that's exactly right. Developers come with their proprietary data, and that proprietary data is how they have operated the assets over past few years and what kind of assets, because there are few developers who specialize in hotels, few in medical offices and hospital, and some of them are mixed use. They do all kinds of assets. So that's the data which our platform, when they ingest all that data, our platform is able to learn them really well. And based on that, it's able to advise the developers. Again, our product tries to understand different locations, different zip codes, different counties, and what's the demand around it. And it does like a match between the area and the developer and what kind of assets they're looking at. But yes, in short, it's a real estate simulation platform.
So you talked about a little bit of you got exposure to this working on a lot of the infrastructure projects that you started for Wise. And then your interest and curiosity in simulations and what have you. How did this come together and become Winpra, right? And the underlying question there is, why do this? You could be doing so many different things. And more specifically, why do this now?
That's again a great question. So why am I doing the simulation part, or maybe like the product that I'm building now? Trust me, I asked myself this question so many times. It was not intentional where I want to go build a company in real estate. Nothing of that sort. Why I said when you asked me about Wise is it's the kind of the same companies. When we were installing solar power plants, 14 kilowatt to 20 kilowatt per hour power plants that we used to build, we used to install in schools. During that installation process, and those power plants used to provide electricity for all 300, 400 students, along with hot water systems. And most of those schools haven't experienced hot water at any point in time. They didn't even know for showers, you actually need hot water. So, we're installing that. We actually involved students, the underprivileged students, during the installation process, which is like a month and a half to two. And while they were going through that, they were so excited, right? When we were installing those projects, it's like a simulation for them, being hands on with those projects. That's the exact same way we are creating for Winpra now, for these large scale infrastructure projects. You want to simulate first in a digital platform, not just the architecture. It could be a financial model. It could be if you were to build a particular asset in that area, how many jobs are you creating? What kind of impact are you creating for the government, for the locals, not just for today, but 3 years, 5 years down the line? Okay, what if Tesla were to come in and open an office there in that scenario? So when you're running these simulations, that's the kind of decision making that you're doing. Decision making is not about deciding the final choice pick of all the choices. It's this whole process of doing all these what if scenarios that's what I see very a similarity between my previous and my current journey now.
What I find the most interesting is in one case, you're working and helping probably the bottom 10%. And here you're probably working with maybe the top 1% and creating impact at both levels of the pyramid. So that's really cool. Now, as you're going through all of this, what's the one big challenge you're facing?
So I think so the challenge, as you said, the bottom 10% and the top 1%. So where we are currently is we launched the company Winpra 3 years ago, May of 2021. And since then we were building. Of course, you take so many pivots in terms of the product, what's your go-to market, what kind of customer should you serve. And there are so many different requirements coming to you from as you speak with more customers. So while building the product, so what we have currently, the product at place, we never built as a team, like just in-house, let's go and work in a lab. So we were always out there working with customers and showing them different features. Is this good? Is this something that you don't need? So we used to take their feedback on a constant basis. But as we see the product working throughout the whole supply chain of real estate, from small developers who just own one single asset to a large developer who owns like hundreds and tens of billions of dollars worth of portfolio. So what we have seen in last couple of months is the product is working the best for large enterprises, at least not in terms of the developer being the recipient of the features of Winpra, like the value that we're adding. Of course, that's constant and it's helping across the supply chain. But for us, is it good to start with the big developers first? And then as we train our models and build, then, every person out there, eventually maybe 3 or 4 years down the line, every person has a mobile app where they can run simulations for any given land parcel and decide what's the right asset to be built over there. But to start off, what's the right size of the customer? Who's not the right customer? But the right size of the customer is what we have been facing some turbulence over past few. But now we are coming to that. Yeah.
Well, you're helping your customers make informed decisions, just as your customers are helping you make informed decisions about who's your ideal persona that you need to work with as of right now. It's a good problem to have. That's in the startup world, we call it growing pains, right? So you don't want to boil the ocean. You want to find who your ideal customer is and then be everything to them. And then, of course, from those, the use cases come up and then you go and become the tool for the masses. That's awesome.
Right.
Now, on the flip side of challenges come opportunities. What's the one that you're most excited about?
So the one that I'm most excited about is we are looking at the projects. Just want to clarify, we are not doing them yet. We are looking at those high-level macro projects where the whole smart city can be built using a product within a day. Coming, not the construction, but at least the whole planning. What kind of hotel should be built in that area based on the demographics? The roads, the bridges, the theme parks, the movie theaters, the whole city can be planned out within a day. That's like the smart city development that I envision using the product that you can build it out. So that's the project I'm excited about.
And when is that coming?
When is that coming? I would love to do it starting today, but it's
Okay.
all up to the developers that we are speaking with. Maybe in next year or so, we will be doing those large scale economic development corridor infrastructure projects.
Hey, the future is here, as they say. That's awesome.
Yeah. And when you're building a startup, you always need to think 3 years, 5 years down the line, right? That's how the world is going to look like, or maybe even 10 years. And then you start building again backwards from there. What kind of impact you're creating then? And you take small steps, baby steps now. So to reach there.
So true. You get to define the cutting edge. That's the most important part.
That's the best part. Yep.
Now, as we talk about the future, I want to take a pause, reflect in a little bit of the history. And I would love for you to share 2 moments in your life, personal, career, take your pick. One where things did not work out as you had expected, and that experience became or led to a failure and then some lessons. And then on the other end, something that blew your own expectations and became a success beyond what you would have imagined?
So failures and setbacks, it's always there. It's the part of the journey. And sometimes it's intense. And in the initial phases, it's like in thousands, and that's always there. What I believe is one of those quotes that you come across is to win a war, you'll have to lose many battles. And it's like thousands of battles. So as long as you train your mind in a way that it could be 10,000, a million battles you have to lose to win the war, that's the perfect way to think about it. But again, in real world, there were times where previously, whether it's during the nonprofit times or during college, I experienced some sort of a setback and I used to quit. And that's when I realized maybe once you quit from that, couple of weeks or months down the line, we start thinking, maybe if I was there long enough, I could have by now it would have been successful. Or maybe I would be still facing the setbacks, but you do regret them, right?
Mhm.
So I think I'm still practicing in a way is not to exit or quit when there are setbacks. So that's this one, but that's the part and parcel of the game.
As you're speaking and as I'm going, this guy has got it, right? You're in your 20s and there's a lot of wisdom there. And now I see the link between your first startup, the social entrepreneurship called Wise. This is called Winpra. So there is some connection there with wisdom, Wise, Winpra. I see where that comes from. Okay.
Yeah, that's a good connecting of dots.
Sai, what do you do for fun?
I do for fun. So I love cooking, and I wouldn't call myself foodie, but I really like trying all the cuisine, not just. So I come from India, and there are 27 languages, or maybe 50 languages. There are each
Yeah.
state has different culture, different kind of food, and I don't know if everyone watching this show know that in India you just just cross borders from one state to the other, the signboards, the language is different. The people are different. The food is completely different. Everything, whether it's in South India, North, you need not go all the way from South to North to experience that. But you can just change borders and get a complete different perspective as a place it is. I think I used to travel a lot in India for the nonprofit, and wherever I used to go, I used to try the new food there. And over here, so what I do is I like cooking different. I love cooking. I love trying new food. And whenever I'm like stressed or anxious, I just go to the kitchen and get few things and start cooking and try new recipes. So that's what I'm super. I love doing that. Yeah.
All right. Now we know what you're going to do when you're in Southern California. We're going to have you cook.
Yep. Absolutely. I would be excited. But again, caution, I'm a vegetarian. So it's only vegetarian delicacies that you'll have it when I cook.
Works for me because so am I.
Oh,
That's
perfect. Amazing.
Sai, as we talk about these things, I want to move us into my favorite part of the show, which is the one-line life lessons. I'd love for you to share a few of your life lessons with us.
So one of the best life lessons is when you're trying to build something or launch any kind of thing, right? When something is new, right? Where there are large incumbents, like it could be people or companies or whatever, and you're trying to enter that space, you're not gonna find a seat in the room, right? So that time you go and serve water bottles there, and that's how you get into the room, right? That's my favorite. It's always been the case, and that's what I've been doing, especially building relationships. And the most important that matters the most than whether it's than product or your degrees or anything is the relationships, especially in the industry that I'm working in, real estate, lending, or insurance. These spaces, these are legacy based industries. There are large incumbents there. So relationships is truly matters when you're trying to build something. So I think these two life lessons have been really impactful. Yep.
That's awesome. Do you have more that you would like to share?
More I'd like to share. I think these two would be good for now. Maybe as life progresses, I'll learn more.
You have a good approach to take. Sai, thank you so much for being on the show, for sharing your story and journey. And many congratulations for all the successes so far. And I know there is many more coming. So would love to bring you back on at a future date and talk about many more of your successes and life experiences, and of course, some life lessons.
Thanks a lot, Nick, and thanks a lot for hosting me here. And hope I was able to give some unique perspectives. Yeah, thanks a lot.